And welcome back to coverage of Grand Prix Louisville. Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Jacob Van Loon, and we are in the first round of the second day. We have Justin Herrell on the left, sitting at 9-0, playing against Brandon Burks, also at 9-0. Jake, Justin's on a deck that I haven't actually seen at all before.
Yeah, it's White Weeny. This is a deck that a lot of people had the very first week, but from there on out, a lot of people thought, people are going to have cards like Flames of the Firebrand in their sideboard. That's what it seemed like going into the Pro Tour, but that's changed since then. And with that change, it opens up the door for White Weeny to be a real deck again.
And it really has been performing well here. Soldier of the Pantheon here for Justin to kick things off. One of the key one-drops in the deck, maybe the best one.
Definitely the best one. It's just so huge.
And then
it powers right past cards that people really want to be using as defensive hurdles. Cards like Blood Baron of Escopa. The turn they come down, the White Weeny deck still has an opportunity to crack in there for some damage and maybe get the opponent dead before they start gaining life with their Blood Barons. Just a great card in a matchup like this.
All right, now, unfortunately for Justin, Brandon Burks has a Doomblade here, which he is going to fire off. Now, he did have to take 2 damage from his Watery Grave to make that happen, but he figured, let's just get that thing off the board right now. Now, this is a key turn here. Dryad Militant for Justin, no follow-up play, though. That can't be what he wants to do on turn 3.
Definitely not. I mean, this double Temple of Triumph draw was definitely not where he wanted to be. It's kind of like being on the draw. And not only is it like being on the draw, but he's down a card. He has multiple copies of Banisher Priests in his deck, which are going to be really strong against the Devotion strategies that don't have a lot of spot removal and do have a lot of creatures. But against a deck like Esper, cards like Banisher Priest are going to be very weak.
And Brandon Burks, he's on Esper Control?
He is.
So this typically you would think would be a tough matchup for the mono white player, right?
Yeah, one would definitely assume this is a
available.
rough matchup. I'm actually surprised he doesn't just run the Banisher Priest out there.
Just as a 2/2?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably exile my own Militant. It's just, it's kind of like preempting a Burrow's Charm effect.
Sure. I mean, he hasn't had a chance to take a look at the deck list like we have, but Brandon Burks has a grand total of 1 creatures in his deck. And it's a one-of. I mean, he has 1 Aetherling. He has no other creatures. All right, here's a Brave the Elements, though, that's going to take care of that Azorius Charm. Gets exiled thanks to Dryad Militant. You see Justin remind his opponent of that, and it keeps the damage flowing here. So, okay, moving things along.
He's continuing to apply a little bit of pressure.
A little bit. Not super impressive. One of the cards, though, that I like and that I was curious if it was going to see some play here in Standard was Spear of Heliod from Justin Herrell, and he's actually got 3 of them in the deck.
It's an absurdly powerful card. I had the great opportunity to play with the card in Limited.
Me too.
At the Pro Tour, which was pretty nice.
That's nice.
And it's a card you can build your deck around in Limited. It's a card that's just very strong constructed. A Glorious Anthem with an added bonus is always a welcome addition to a deck like this.
All right, and here's Jace, Architect of Thought. He's actually going to tick Jace up a notch, so that's going to give -1/-1 to attackers, but the Dryad Militant's still going to have enough to get in there. Sealed Sacred Foundry here for Justin Herrell, and again, he has all the support cards, it feels like, but just not enough creatures to really pressure his opponent. I mean, Brandon's down to 14. He's done a decent job of keeping a little bit of pressure going, but you got to figure that Dryad Militant is going to get outclassed by the big drops here. This looks like Elspeth. Ugh, there it is.
Yeah, it hits the tail, makes a thud sound.
Yeah, is that game? I mean, I know that doesn't literally end the game, but I mean,
it's pretty close.
It's pretty close, right? When you've got a 1-drop against a 6-drop.
It's a 3-for-1 before thing even happens. Now, I mean, now that your opponent's used Burrow's Charm, it's already become basically a 4-for-1.
I mean, he's still not going to be able to get through here, right?
No.
So he's got to find another burn spell, and really, he is trying to be mono-white. The only red are those Boros Charms, right?
Which are great.
Yeah.
They're great in this matchup. They're great in pretty much every matchup when you're a white weenie deck. But
yeah, I think my point is just he's not going to be able to find another burn spell. He does have a Brave the Elements that he's going to be able to use to take down Elspeth. So, I mean, look, this might look okay if you're a Justin Herrell fan here. You're like, well, look, he killed both of the Planeswalkers. Things are okay. But really, they're not, right? He had to use so many cards from his hand to be able to deal with these Planeswalkers that he's just out of gas. He's got, I think, one card left now. And we know the type of cards that Brandon Burks is going to have in his Esper list. I mean, he's keeping his cards pretty close to the vest here, but, here's another 6-drop. Here's his one of Aetherling. And, cards like Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, it's going to be really rough at this point for
Sphinx's
Justin.
Revelation, yeah.
I mean, those 2 tokens are a big enough problem on their own.
Here's a Soldier of the
Pantheon. Then you throw an Aetherling in there,
and Justin just passes a turn back. Aetherling plus the two 1/1s. You can see them. That's a dice representing 2 1/1 soldiers. That little red and black dice there. All right, here's a Scryland for Brandon. Brave the Elements, certainly a powerful card. All right, make this guy unblockable, I'm assuming. And it looks like Brandon's going to go to work on Justin's life total since he doesn't have anything else to do anyway. He's going to be able to blink his Aetherling and give it pseudo-vigilance.
Yeah, and I mean, here he's probably going to pump the Aetherling twice or 3 times. Just wants to make it into a 3-turn clock.
Mm-hmm. Three times it is. Take 7.
That way he still has the ability to blink his Aetherling twice.
Yep. And he's going to send the turn back, which is going to put the Aetherling back into play. And Justin Herrell draws his card for the turn, surveys the scene, and it is a bit of a wreckage here for him.
It does not look great for him.
He's got 1 land and 1 spell in hand. I couldn't quite see what it was.
He only has 1 card in hand? Is that correct, or 2? 2.
He's got a land and a spell.
Oh, with one of them being a land, I think it's not possible for him to win.
Yeah, agreed. And he looks like he also agrees with you on that one, Jake, as he scoops up. So really not the start that he wanted. You mentioned it, he's playing those temples. And they kind of hurt him a bit in the early game there. Not the ideal lands to have in your opener when you're really trying to play a monocolored deck.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a great matchup for him. There are other aggressive decks that, play things like Garrett Caller of Beast or Domri Raid or Jace Architect of Thought, and they have a real shot against these control strategies because they can just go over the top. But this deck, it's a creature-based deck that's playing cards the control deck can ignore. For example, Spear of Heliod, we talked about how great that card is, but in a matchup like this, where your opponent isn't trying to pressure you with creatures at all, and it's an Anthem effect. Anthem effects are very bad against control decks that have a lot of removal, because it's a card that you're using a turn to cast.
Okay.
It makes your other card stronger, but it's a card your opponent can completely ignore and just kill your creatures, and then they just get a free card out of it.
Right.
So Anthem effects are notoriously weak against control strategies.
Would you expect him to take them out?
I would. I would expect him to take out his Banisher Priests and his Spears. Let's see if he has enough things to bring in if he does so.
What does he have to replace those with?
Well,
he's got more creatures. I see he's got Precinct Captains, Fiendslayer Paladins, and a Boros Reckoner.
Yeah, I think he might just be bringing in a Precinct Captain, 2 Ajani's.
Ajani Caller of the Pride seems like a really nice addition. It can hit... you were just mentioning that the... Heliod, his spear, the Spear of Heliod, it works into the Esper or any control deck's game plan in that it makes your other cards worse, right? In the sense that even though you put it in there to make them better, it actually puts so much more pressure on those cards to stay on the battlefield that, the other deck is going to be able to remove your stuff. That's what the deck's designed to do.
Yeah,
But-
you're making your opponent's removal spell stronger.
Right, but when you play a card like a Johnny Caller of the Pride, you're now hitting the deck from a completely different angle, right? They have to gear their deck to be able to take care of creatures. And when you play a Planeswalker that can just sit there and threaten to make a lethal amount of creatures, you know, if it were to ultimate, or just help the creatures you already have get better, then
the thing
all of a
is-
sudden it puts the control deck in kind of an awkward position.
The reason a Johnny is better than something like Spear of Heliod in a matchup like this is that a Johnny's minus ability as a follow-up to making a guy much bigger, it can just hit control opponents for huge amounts of damage, and you can use it in conjunction with something like Brave the Elements or Burrow's Charm, and catch people off guard when they only have 2 mana open and you're attacking.
Right.
That being said, you really just want to keep +1ing it, and once you can threaten an ultimate, then your opponent's going to need to sculpt their hand in a certain way, and you can really force them to use certain cards, and then if you do so, you get to just win. It attacks them from multiple angles.
It does.
It's a strong card against a control strategy, whereas Spear of Heliod is just too narrow in what it does against control deck.
Yeah, I've seen it time and time again with a Johnny Caller of the Pride, where the aggressive player will play a Johnny and play some amount of creatures. And what ends up happening is a Johnny starts ticking upwards and threatening to ultimate. But you don't actually ultimate it. What you do is just keep beating down your opponent with the creatures you have. You force them to play a sweeper, and then you can ultimate and make them have another sweeper. And that's the order of the day. If they happen to have it, well, then they happen to have it.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes you have a Burrow's Charm, too, so you can, you can blank one of those sweepers.
Yeah, which is
get them.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, usually the first ones, they don't have mana to counter a follow-up. But I don't know if Brandon's going to have any counter spells in his deck post-board against White Weenie.
Now, how good
It'd
is
be a little
Brave the
strange.
Elements here? I mean, it seems really good in the field. Remember, there's a lot of like nearly monocolored decks out there that are trying to get devotion going, and
Yeah,
you can
it's-
use it just to
It's
get
not the
every creature
best
through.
here. It's fine, though. I mean, I don't despise it.
Okay.
But I think that he's also bringing in Glare of Heresy for things like Detention Sphere and Elspeth if it comes to it.
Glare of Heresy is the 1 and a white sorcery that lets you exile a white permanent.
Correct.
All right, and here we go again. Same start though. The Temple of Triumph here. You know, that is just. Doesn't he just want to play land 1-drop ideally here on turn 1?
Yeah, I mean, that would be ideal for him.
Uh huh.
But, I mean, smoothing out the mana is important. Burrow's Charm is one of the best cards in his deck. I think it is worth it for him to be playing those temples.
Okay. I mean, if I'm playing 8 2-powered 1-drops, like, pretty bummed if I don't have one on turn 1.
I can hear that.
Yep. All right, Temple of Silence here for Brandon Burks. Now let's see what the follow-up play is here for Justin. Wants to start getting some pressure going. All right, well, there it is. A Dryad Militant and a Judge's Familiar. Okay, interesting. So he's got a little bit of disruption and a little bit of
He's
pressure
red and white
here.
mana, and he has blue, white, and green creatures in play. That's turn 2.
Yeah. All right, and there's, oh, interesting, a Soldier of the Pantheon there for Brandon out of his sideboard.
And that's
going to
very strong here.
Yeah, that's going to stop that Dryad Militant in its tracks.
It's a brick wall. So likely just a Judge's Familiar and a... Ooh.
So what's the plan here? Brave the Elements doesn't
Yeah,
do
no,
what he
this
wants
was
it
a
to do,
mistake.
does it? Ooh, and he just has to throw away his Dryad Militant here?
Yeah, definitely not where he wants to be.
All right, well, he's going to follow up with the Temple of Triumph, keep that card back on top. Well, actually, it looks like he's still thinking. And is that a Daring Skyjack? It is. And we got a reader here. Brandon Burks is like, wait, didn't I draft that last year?
If you were drafting that set correctly, you were.
Exactly. Yeah, I drafted a lot of Daring Skyjacks, and that's an
As did
interesting
I.
addition here from Justin Herrell. Now, that will be able to trade off for the Soldier of the Pantheon potentially, but kind of a bummer that he doesn't have that Dryad Militant hanging out anymore. It looks like Brandon's considering an attack here, though it does still keep that Daring Skyjack back if he leaves his Soldier of the Pantheon. And he's just going to play a land and say go. All right. Draw step. That was a Mutavault, I believe, and that's what he left on top of his library there.
I like leaving the Mutavault on top.
Mutavault's awesome. Awesome against control as well. We talked about recovering from a Wrath effect. And whoa! Spear of Heliod, though, still only 1 attack here. It's 2 damage from the Judge's Familiar potentially here. And sure enough, it gets in there. All right, so Justin rebuilding here and starting to put himself in a position where he can start applying some real pressure. See what Brandon comes up with here. Something like a Supreme Verdict. Would he just snap it off here if he had it?
I don't think so. I think the Soldier has quite a bit of value. Yeah, he will. It's looking like, if you make that attack with that Soldier, you almost always are just going to follow it up with the Verdict.
Well, I mean, he also could just be anticipating Mutavault being activated and not being able to block the Skyjack, the Mutavault, or the Judge's Familiar, right?
Well, I mean, he would just want to trade with the Mutavault.
Isn't it a 3/3 though?
Oh, I guess it is a 3/3. Yes,
Yeah.
So you're right. You're right.
But anyway, Supreme Verdict.
Yeah.
Wipes the board away and does leave that Mutavault though. So we're going to see how much work this Mutavault can do.
It's going to be pounding away for 3 a turn. Treetop Village is definitely a relevant source of damage.
Yeah,
so.
only 1 mana to activate this particular Treetop Village.
Yes.
It can do a lot of work here. It does depend though on what else Justin Herrell has going on in his hand. If he's going to be able to recover from this situation. No, he's tapped the Mutavault. So Daring Skyjack, he's got other plans this turn, and a Judge's Familiar. So no Mutavault attack this turn, but he's rebuilt his board to exactly what it was pre-Wrath. Temple of Deceit, Scry Trigger. Brandon Burks in the tank a bit here, and it looks like that one's going to go to the bottom of the deck. And is this another Supreme Verdict? Yeah, it sure is. And down they go. That is plan A for Brandon Burks here. Just keep killing everything that Justin puts up, and he's been able to do it. And I think we're going to see Mutavault get in there for 3 now. And looks like, I don't know that he has a follow-up play. I think he's got a Brave the Elements in hand, which unfortunately for Justin doesn't do anything against Supreme Verdict.
It's pretty rough here. Justin kind of fell into a trap that people fall into when playing against a deck like Esper. When you can take that damage with Mutavault, just take it. I mean, they're going to have 5 mana. They're a deck with tons of cards like Far Away and Supreme Verdicts and Detention Sphere. It's very unlikely that you're going to get past the turn back with creatures left on the battlefield. Just play 1 guy and cast your Mutavault.
Yep, and there's a Doomblade to take out the Mutavault, and it looks like Justin Herrell is just out of gas here. Remember, Brave the Elements doesn't work with Mutavault because Mutavault's not white.
Correct.
And it looks like Brandon Burks is in the driver's seat now. We can't get a look at his hand because he keeps his cards pretty close to the vest there, but I mean, you got to figure that he's going to be in a great position here to start just taking over this game, as we've now entered the stage where Brandon Burks, the cards that he draws off the top of his deck can be quite strong, and the ones that Justin Herrell draws are generally not.
Correct.
All right, he draws another Scryland, and he ships away something, and I think he's just, shipping the turn back. So, kind of misery here, and this is the death knell potentially here. Sphinx's Revelation. It looks like it's for 3, actually. I believe that Hallowed Fountain came into play tapped. Yeah, it was. But that's just going to bolster Brandon Burks' life total. It's going to draw him 3 cards, and is going to put him in firm control of this game. This is when you're sitting in Justin Herrell's seat, and look, the reality is you've lost this game. And you just have to watch your opponent play stuff like, well, Aetherling, for example. More Sphinx's Revelation.
The Aetherling can't really attack with the... Oh, no, it can. It can just blink after the spear
That's
tries
right,
to hit it.
yeah. So
Yeah, that's the spirit doesn't even really match up that well against the Aetherling.
And this is kind of what we were just talking about, right? I mean, Justin Herrell's top deck is Soldier of the Pantheon with his opponent sitting at 17 life with a much bigger creature and a lot more cards in hand. More mana on the table, just completely dominating board presence here. And I expect that we'll get a concession here from Justin Herrell pretty shortly, to be honest. I mean, that Aetherling is not something that he's well equipped to deal with, and it finishes the game so quickly. He's got him on a 3-turn clock here. Just attack for 6 3 times, and that'll do it. These are the two of the undefeated players still here in round 10 from Grand Prix Louisville. Interesting, Justin Herrell, 9-0 day 1 with this deck that we see here. He's ran into potentially a bad matchup. I don't know. Things didn't really get sequenced out too well for him in the early stages.
Yeah, I think this matchup's actually not that bad for him.
Okay.
I mean, he has Burrows Charm, he has Mutavault. I mean, if he hadn't just ran the Militant into the Soldier of the Pantheon, and I think if he had been more prudent with his Mutavault attacks, Brennan Burks would at least be in range to be dead to something like a Burrows Charm.
A sequence of Burrows Charm
he really
draws.
didn't have to play into those Supreme Verdicts. He allowed his opponent to get multiple cards for 1 card more than once. And
yeah, that's rough. An 0 for 1 and then 2 for 1s is pretty much
Yeah, and you just need to
really
grind out those points of damage. And I understand that your opponent just has more powerful cards in his deck than you, but Justin also drew poorly here. And, we can't discount the fact that, he didn't get a lot of his best cards.
That's true. All right, well, pass the turn back to him. More lands off the top, and Justin has seen enough. Brandon Burks is victorious. He is going to be 10-0 with Esper Control. We've seen Esper Control all over the place out in the feature match area as well as just in the regular match area. Esper Control, very popular choice here this weekend, and I'm really curious to see how it ends up finishing. All right, let's jump over to our other match here. We've got Reed Duke on the right-hand side of your screen. And
he's battling against Chris Fennell on the left.
And Chris Fennell is playing a deck, Jake, that we talked about a lot yesterday, in part because it's the deck that you feel is the strongest in the field after doing your research for your column, as well as just playing a ton of Magic Online matches after the Pro Tour. You feel like this mostly green but with some red Devotion deck is the deck.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the deck to beat in the coming weeks. The deck's really difficult to play, but if you're playing it correctly, it's just such a powerful entity.
Okay, and Reed Duke uses the Detention Sphere to take down a Pelukrinos here. Plays a Scryland. And we see that there's a 3/3 Mistcutter Hydra, which looks like it's going to threaten Jace here. Potentially finish him off. Chris Fennell definitely has a solid reputation as a limited player.
Yes.
But also has been working on his constructed game, and I'm assuming he's quite good at constructed as well. All right, Burning Tree Emissary here for Chris Fennell. But this isn't... That's not really what that card's in the deck for, right? I mean, we see it, as a late game play here. I mean, it does get his Nykthos pumped up a little bit more, and it is another body, but it's not the explosive start type BTE that we see sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting now because it looks like Chris has a Xenagos in hand, but he must have either have a read on Reed or know from a Jace activation that Reed has a negate in hand.
I
because
see.
He chose to hold that Xenagos in hand.
Okay. And there's an Elspeth. That will actually let Chris resolve his Xenagos, so his patience is rewarded. Unfortunately, he's facing down Elspeth in addition.
Yes.
What did he draw there?
That was a Nylea.
Okay.
God of the Hunt. I'm
That's
actually
interesting,
quite
too.
Surprised that he chose to play the.
All right, so Reed
no,
Duke
it's
is
actually, it's a Garruk,
Oh, is it Garruk? Okay.
not a Xenagos in hand. So
Oh.
he does not know about the
negate.
negate, correct?
Okay, sure. So Nylea hits the battlefield here after the 3 soldier tokens trade for the Mistcutter Hydra. Meanwhile, the Burning Tree Emissary gets in to damage Elspeth and bring her loyalty down to 3. Looks like there's a little, maybe a life total or a judge thing, but they got it sorted. And Reed draws his card for the turn.
What game is this that we're watching?
It looks like Reed's up a game. I think we're in game 2 here.
Oh, okay.
So Elspeth, +1, make 3 more soldier tokens, and it's getting a little bit... It's slowly slipping away from Chris Fennell, but he does have many draws here, right, that can do some sweet stuff. All right, and there's the negate that you talked about a little bit earlier there.
Yeah, at this point, it does not seem like there's much that Chris can do.
Now, if he could get that Nylea, God of the Hunt, active, we'd be talking.
Yes, but it's a tall order.
Very tall order here. All right, draw step here for Reed Duke. Temple of Deceit, going to get another scry activation. I've really seen that the Esper deck seems to be the one that takes advantage of these scry lands the most. It's the one that can afford to play tap lands and not worry about it as much, and it allows it to find the answers, the specific answers that it needs. And there's a Voyaging Satyr now for Chris Fennell, so pretty unimpressive. He does attack now with the Burning Tree Emissary at Elspeth here, though.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
Reed blocks with
he can go ahead
all
and
of
pump
his
this
creatures.
with Nylea.
Yeah.
Comes a 4/4 trample. He gets rid of 4 of these tokens, and it may not seem like anything, and it's because it's not really anything. But
yeah, and there it is, Sphinx's Revelation for Reed Duke on end step. It's going to draw him 6 cards, gain him 6 life, and that's often the death knell, right? When your opponent is finally completely out of cards, has nothing else going on, and then you fire off a huge Revelation.
When you already have an Elspeth in play that's winning the game by itself.
Yeah, that's already winning. It's just that the turning point is very stark at that moment. So Reed Duke looks to be fully in the driver's seat. I don't think Reed is 9-0 though in the tournament.
No, I think
he's
probably
X2. Yeah. And I would assume, of course, that Chris Fennell is also X and 2. Draw step here for Fennell. Is there anything? Does Pelukranos get him out of this? Is there anything?
No.
I mean, Reed has a full grip and a bunch of untapped lands as well, so the likelihood of anything resolving that matters is also quite low. 7 cards in hand. I saw Chris. I mean, I saw Reed, lift up his hands like he does when he's showing you how many he's got, and he's like, I've got 6 or 7.
Yeah, even if he plays a Garruk here and pluses it, Reed gets to just kill it with soldier tokens his next turn, and then he's threatening an Elspeth ultimate on the following turn, which would be lethal. Elspeth ultimate's rarely not lethal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun part about that.
Chris Fennell has access to just tons of mana here, though, if he were able to play something along the lines of Pelukranos because of that Nykthos, but it looks like he was just tanked out about playing a second Voyaging Satyr that whole time.
Yeah, I think he was trying to decide whether or not it was worth it to even play the card, or whether or not he should just be sitting on it and maybe hoping that Reed will not attack him and play around something. But
okay.
In hindsight at this point, he's just hoping for a miracle. Yeah.
And we see the advantage from Elspeth here is pretty apparent. He's got 8 soldier tokens.
Yeah.
Reed Duke feeling no pressure whatsoever to do anything at this moment, just passes the turn back again. And let's see what Chris Fennell comes up with here. I mean, he has access to just infinite mana. Well, there's a Garruk, but the chances of that resolving seem quite low. And there's a Dissolve from Reed Duke. Again, both players sitting at 7-2. Reed Duke up a game here, and looks like he's got this match well in hand.
Yes.
We've seen this time and time again. Once the Esper Control deck turns the corner and lands in Elspeth or fires off that big Sphinx's Revelation, it's often... Yeah, all right, so attack with everything. And as you mentioned before, Jake, rarely not lethal, because you generally just don't ultimate Elspeth unless it's going to be lethal.
Such a powerful effect. You know, I